Good afternoon, everybody. We are 2 minutes into the afternoon, so I'm gonna call it. So happy to have you all with us here today. I hope you enjoyed our music. It was by one of our former and beloved staff, Blaze Reader the Third. So that was I think our one of our first times using that in one of our openings. So we're all happy about that today. Um, as we're getting started, please introduce yourselves in the chat. We love to know who's in the room with us, and please feel free to network as well as you can in the chat. I was trying to mute somebody else that was unmuted, and I muted myself. But go ahead and mute yourself so I don't accidentally mute myself at random, if you don't mind. Um, so just a few kind of nuts and bolts things right as we're getting off the top here. This event is being live streamed to Facebook, and that means the recording will be available on Facebook immediately after. You can also enable closed captioning. If you would like to do that, you can look to the bottom of your screen and you'll see the word captions. You can click that, and you can also choose the language that if you want it translated, if English is not the easiest language for you to learn things in, hopefully that will help a little bit. And then after the event, we'll send an email to everyone who registered, as well as links with a recording of the presentation, as well as links to any of the presentations. And we also summarize the links that are shared in the chat. So you're able to get a sense of what's in the chat as well. And the recordings and all that also gets posted to our webpage at Reimagine Appalachia/events, if you ever want to find it again. Or all of our events are on there for you. I'm trying to make it easy. And we'll be kicking out all the AI note takers because we take notes for you, so we don't need to take notes twice. All right. So a little bit about why we're here today. So Reimagine Appalachia is a coalition. We primarily work in West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. The organization was born out of the recognition that the economy has not been working for most of the people and places in our region. And what do we do about that? So we were brought together by a diverse set of economic, environmental, community, and labor organizations to think about how we can build common ground and how we can build the future that we want to see, one that's good for workers, communities, and the environment. So if we are looking to build an economy that is inclusive of working people, then that means we need to think about data centers. So here we find ourselves today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the reasoning we had behind this webinar, in particular, and the topics we'll be discussing today. So I saw this article that I found incredibly compelling from the Wall Street Journal. I'll share it for you in the chat. And there is a free link for you if you don't have a Wall Street Journal account. So you've lucked out. But it was about how so much of the construction that's going to happen in 2026 is going to be data centers. And the article, it mentions that the data centers construction spending will rise by 23%, and about 6% of non-residential building construction will be data centers. So that's was previously 2% in 2023. So we have this massive explosion of construction of data centers, which a lot of people have a variety of feelings about. And those feelings are relevant. I strongly believe that communities should be at the table when it comes to planning the development what they want to see. But another thing I very strongly believe is that any construction that we do should be creating good jobs that are accessible to the local community and have pathways into them for apprenticeships, that they provide good wages, that they have high safety standards. So this construction is happening in our region. How can we make sure that it is safe and good for workers and paying our workers what they deserve? So we have three experts from the industry and the region who have been so gracious as to join us today. We're very happy to have you, Marshall, Justin, and John. And they're going to talk a little bit about what they're seeing on the ground, what this work looks like, as well as what we should keep in mind and some of the lessons learned from other sectors, in the region over time. We know a lot about how to do construction in the region and how to do it well and how to have workers at the table. And so we need to make sure that we're applying all those important lessons learned we've learned across other industries to data centers as they come into the region as well. So first, we're going to be hearing from Marshall Brown, and nothing is new to you, or I'm sure many things are new, but certainly not data centers.
Right.
So joining us, from the thick of our other speakers are from West Virginia. They're a little bit newer there. It's in a totally different place. So I'm kind of interested to think about what the construction sector looks like and is approaching these issues from these very different sort of places in the timeline as far as all this construction. So Marshall, please introduce yourself and your work. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in Northern Virginia and elsewhere.
Yeah, appreciate that. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I was on a field trip the last 2 days, my daughter, and being around a bunch of middle school kids. Voice is feeling a little like it's going out a little bit from not yelling at them, but trying to keep them in line. But yeah, my name is Marshall Brown. Glad to be here today. I work with LESIT. That's an acronym. It's Laborers, Employers, Cooperation, Education, Trust. We're one of the tri-funds for LIUNA, the Laborers International Union in North America. Obviously, we operate throughout the U.S. and Canada. Our region specifically covers the Mid-Atlantic. So we cover North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Out of our 550 or 530,000 LIUNA members, we represent close to 40,000 throughout the 5 states in the district. Again, we do everything from building, heavy highway, energy, you name it. If it's got laborers on it, we do it. And so, LESIT, what we are is we are basically the easy way to kind of say what we do is we're basically the business development arm here in the Mid-Atlantic for our signatory contractors, for our members. So we're out looking at emerging industries, current industries that we're in. We're trying to find opportunities for our current signatory contractors to get on projects. We're also out talking to potential, non-union contractors who could benefit from our services. And then a lot of what we do as well from the top down, it's meeting with owners, developers, politicians about the benefits of working with labor in general, working on a project labor agreements, and the benefits for the local workforce and the people that sometimes are overlooked. The construction men and women that are building projects. Sometimes that's kind of the oversight when you're looking at a new development. And so I say less at the biggest piece of what we do is the education part of that. But our regional office, our headquarters is in Washington, D.C. I'm currently sitting about 30 miles west of D.C. in Reston, Virginia, Fairfax County, AOL. I know everyone probably had AOL accounts, back in the day. AOL is headquartered here in Herndon, Virginia, back in the day. And that's why, the data center market that we're talking about, that's why you see the data centers here. Obviously, the access to DC, and also you have Verizon, you have AOL that was headquartered. The fiber network here was big. There was a lot of land, 20, 30, 40 years ago in Fairfax and Loudoun County, Virginia. And throughout the years, that obviously has been built up with development, and a big industry is the data center market. Myself in particular, I started with LIUNA back in 2007. So I'm going on 19 years, started in North Carolina. Our history dates back for myself in data centers 2008, when Facebook was Facebook. Now it's Meta. There was a massive development called it was a Facebook data center in Forest City, North Carolina. Didn't really know much about what a data center was, but DPR Construction, who's the signatory, they were the builder of it, and so we had laborers on the project back then. Since I moved up to the DC market here in Reston and 2015, and so we've seen kind of the thick of it, right? I live in Loudoun County. I'm a resident of Loudoun County, Virginia. It's data center alley. It's the capital for data centers, currently in the world. I think over the next 10, 15 years, you could see Texas and other markets kind of take over as land availability becomes scarce here in Virginia. But from our perspective, we've had a lot of success on data centers. Out of 90 current projects roughly going on in the Mid-Atlantic region, we probably have signatory contractors, and I would say 70 to 80% of those. Now, we're not doing them 100% union. But when I say our contractors, civil site work, could be drywall, could be ancillary labor work. We do work with the mechanical, electrical trades. But the one thing, is that these projects are long-term employment opportunities for the LIUNA, men and women that are our members. Also, I know the IBW, they're rocking and rolling here in the Mid-Atlantic as well. And then you got the carpenters, you got the operating engineers, and obviously the UA. So from our point of view, it's an industry that I know it's been a hot topic here in the last year or 2 years, but we don't want to see it leave. And you're seeing some, legislative policies that could be fast track laws. I know I got my brothers from West Virginia that might talk about some of the fast track laws there in West Virginia. We have the grid standards in Pennsylvania, which could, help push some of these developments along with state permitting. That doesn't necessarily override local permitting, but the benefit for us is they are long-term projects here in the Mid-Atlantic. And being a resident of Loudoun County, I'm going to share a slide real quick. It's not a presentation, but it is just a couple pictures. If you guys, can everyone see this?
Looks
Can you see
great.
that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So to give you an idea, this is actually my neighborhood in Ashburn, Virginia. My wife went on a walk a couple of days ago. I mean, this is probably a bank of 4 or 5 data centers coming out of the ground. So that goes to show you how close I am to these developments. A further right to where you see this construction coming out of the ground, there's another data center called Vantage Data Center. To give you an idea of the opportunity, one of our signatory contractors, Independence, did $100 million site work package on the Vantage Data Center. It was a 3 to 4 year project, and there's a few other buildings coming out of the ground. But for employment standpoint, from laborers and local workforce, that is a long-term project for a site work package. $100 million. I think it's the biggest site work package in the history of Independence, who has been around for decades. But good projects, these coming out of the ground, we will have subcontractors on them. And from a resident standpoint, this isn't me just speaking from the LIUNA hat. Hey, it's good employment opportunities for our members. I'm a resident of Loudoun County. These developments, they're going to look like business parks, industrial buildings. They look pretty good. They're not all just gray buildings. The one thing I'm not worried about is overloading our local infrastructure. My wife's a teacher in Loudoun County. It's not going to overload the school system in Loudoun County. It's not going to overload the emergency service system in Loudoun County. You're going to have probably, I'd say, 100 people working around the clock when these projects are built and finished, people working inside of them. But you will have, thousands of workers between these developments working, for the next couple of years. From LIUNA, from our perspective, we probably have a few thousand members of our own working on data centers. I would say each data center that we have, from site work to drywall to work with the MEP trades, we probably have a few hundred members per project on those that we work in. So this is from my neighborhood showing you how close I actually am to this industry. Here's when it comes to PLAs, a lot of the work that we get, to be honest, it's our contractors. We're making introductions where we can with these hyperscalers, the Amazons, the QTSs, the stack infrastructure who develop these projects. A lot of it is, we're bringing leads to our signatories. They're obviously bidding work day in and day out. The good news is wages aren't a deterrent when it comes to getting a package. these developers want to have contractors that can get the job done on time under budget. And so our wages do compete in this market from my perspective. But this is a project, Saby Data Center. When I moved up here in 2015, this is under a project labor agreement. This started in 2015. This is actually pictures from the third building that's being built. So you're looking at 11 years of construction from building. They actually went backwards. They went building B or C, B, and A. So from 2015 to 2026, when this project will wrap up, this is 11 years employment. Now it's not, wall to wall full time, but it's pretty back to back on these projects. So this is one where they're paying, good wages. They have apprentices. We have apprentices on the project. Safety standards is a big deal with these developments. Also, from looking at labor management. I work for Lesset. We're a labor management fund. We like to have conversations with developers, with the team. The picture there on the far left, that's a guy named Donnie that runs a project from Saby. So we have, conversations, daily, not daily, but, probably weekly, every couple months, we're getting together, we're meeting, we're getting access to the sites. But these are three projects that have, these safety standards, local hiring, apprenticeship, and good wages on this project. So I wanted to point that one out. That's probably our biggest here in the Northern Virginia area when it comes to a 100% union project. So everybody on this project is union here, and this is 11 year project. Um, when regards to the current state, we are starting to have more conversations with other developers. Penzance is a developer. They've got developments in Virginia. They've got a few coming up. They got one coming up in West Virginia. They're starting to need labor at the table when it comes to hearings, speaking on the benefits of these projects, because obviously people don't necessarily want them in their backyard. But our goal is, hey, if we can get some kind of standards, some type of project labor agreement, a memorandum of understanding to have our contractors, our members on this project, it keeps people at home. We're going to come out and support those projects. Another one is Prologis. It's another developer. They're looking to refurbish warehouse south of Dulles, Virginia, the airport to data centers. And so we're speaking, in support of these developments. We're going to the, Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. We're talking in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It could be, Pennsylvania is obviously a hotbed, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And so wherever we have opportunities, we're going to go and support these developments, assuming that they're wanting to do things the right way and use local contractors and local union contractors. I have a video real quick. Let me see if this will play. And there's no sound, just background. This is actually us at a rally in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Probably 70 to 80 construction, tradesmen and women showed up to support Penzance. And this development hasn't been approved yet, but the goal is to get it approved, and they're going to utilize union labor and our signatories on this project. So yeah, if I don't know if you could hear, it's just again just background noise and music. But again, this is us showing up with 70, labor men and women, various trades, their membership, local residents, talking about the benefits of what these projects can actually do for them. And another thing that we look at from corporate affairs angle, there is pension fund money. We probably have 70 to, I think 60 to $70 billion of pension fund money invested throughout developments throughout the U.S. and Canada and everything in between. We do have relationships with like QTS. I know the carpenters and the operators have like $1 billion invested with QTS, Stack Infrastructure through Blue Owl. We track these investments for LIUNA. And so that's actually opened up doors for us to have conversations with these developers to bring our signatories to the table, to talk about the benefits of working with the trades, the support we can offer, and obviously the safe and skilled men and women that build these projects. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I'm here in Loudoun County, Virginia, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. It's great to hear about your work and what y'all are into. Um, and Yeah, I'll have probably more questions later to dig into a few more of those standards and what exactly we want those to look like. But for now, we're gonna. Can you stop sharing if
Yep, yep. Let me
you're on it? But for now, let's hand it over to Justin and hear a little bit about what this work is looking like in West Virginia.
Sure. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, Marshall. That was great. So Justin Williams with Affiliated Construction Trades, West Virginia Building Trades. So we represent all 15 crafts in the construction industry across West Virginia. We cover the whole state, and John and I work together. So we do a lot of the similar stuff that Marshall talked about. We represent construction workers, both publicly and then on legislative and at the Capitol. We have a government affairs team. We do PR. We do research on contractors, developers, and we work through that. Some of the stuff that we discussed and wanted to talk about was, Marshall mentioned project labor agreements or memorandums of agreement or understanding. That's one of the things that I work on decent amount of time, right? Anytime a project or a developer comes up and there's going to be a project in West Virginia, we want to make sure to try to secure some type of agreement that says that, when it's going to be built in West Virginia, that they're going to use local workers, are going to, pay good wages, are going to have good benefits, safety training, drug-free workforce. And that way it's done right and done properly because the people building in that way are the folks that live in those communities, right? It's not somebody coming in from somewhere else to build it. And so, if you have to drive by that data center every day, as Marshall does as he leaves his development, you're going to want to make sure that it's done the right way and that your community is protected. And so that's really one of the biggest points of why we work on those agreements because that really makes sure that, that developer, that contractor becomes a part of the community. They're not just here to, you know, we in West Virginia have a long time been an exporter of all things, whether it be people or goods, particularly coal and electricity for that matter. And so, we want folks who are really going to be part of the community in West Virginia. And so, that's why we try to secure those agreements on the front end and as early as possible. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about some of the successes or other examples that haven't been in a minute. But, the earlier somebody can do that, the more beneficial it is to those communities, to our folks, because we talked about apprenticeships and things. And that's really what allows apprenticeship programs to be able to take in the correct amount of apprentices to be able to do that work, not only the construction work, but the long-term maintenance that comes along with it. And so, you're working to build it, and that's a big number of workers, but our folks make their careers in maintaining projects, whether it's energy projects, data center projects, factories or whatever the case may be. That's what keeps people employed, not just for the length of the construction, but for a career in the trades is those projects. The biggest things that we see when those agreements, when we try to get them in place, is obviously local hire agreements, apprenticeship usage, making sure that they are helping to train the next generation of workers, because that's really what's important in this. We've seen it. There's a need for skilled trade workers for several years. We, as a society, kind of left the skilled trades behind a little bit, and so now we're seeing the demand is high because we didn't have enough folks going into those careers for several years. And so, that investment into apprenticeship programs, to the training that they're doing, there's nobody's paying into that except our members, our contractors, those developers to make sure that they are trained to do that. And so, we want to make sure that the construction is responsible, that they're using local workers, apprentices, paying a good wage, people with benefits and whether that's health insurance or pension so that they can retire with dignity, right? But also health insurance. Marshall mentioned, we don't want to overwhelm any of our things. And so our folks are paying a good rate to whether it's our local hospitals, our local clinics, doctors. When you have insurance, people use it. And so it's what keeps those jobs going forward, what keeps those other opportunities alive. We see the hospital, they're investing tons of money, and that's a lot because of our members are able to use the insurance that they're provided in a good benefits package. Um, Dana wanted me to talk a little bit about what we've seen so far in West Virginia. Obviously we're not Virginia, Northern Virginia, or even Ohio, and we're kind of seeing our first go around of hyperscale. We've had a few other data centers in West Virginia, but we're getting our first hyperscales off the ground, and one has started down in the western Ohio River area of West Virginia. So far, they've done a little bit of work, some site prep work, and as Marshall mentioned, those are big projects, and they're using union workers down there. And so, there's a couple hundred probably folks down there doing site prep work, and so and those are folks now who probably had to go out of town to travel to do work before, and now they get to like stay home in West Virginia and stay, there to do work. Before they were, who knows where they were traveling to, whether it be on a highway job or, other type of commercial job to, even if it was to Columbus, which isn't too far up the road with the mega projects they've seen with CHIPS and Science Act or any other things, they're able to do that here in West Virginia. Um, and part of that I think is also important is we've partnered a lot with our community technical colleges over the last several years of educating the workforce to where our folks are able to get an associate's degree when they complete their associate's degree, but they're also training folks to work in those facilities, right? And that's just up the road from Marshall University and Mount West, and they're doing a partnership with Nscale to start doing training. And Marshall has their Cybersecurity Institute, and they're doing a lot of training for that type of cybersecurity protections for the data that exists out there, right? We all have data out there. We all click that little button at the bottom of every screen that says, take my cookies, sure, whatever all this fine print says, we're fine with it, and we just give it away to everybody. So we need to make sure that it's protected. And, Marshall is really invested in doing that and making sure that it is protected for us here in West Virginia. And so, there's a lot going into that. And then I think the other part that's going to be hopefully is going to be beneficial to us all in the long run is the downstream jobs that come from this. Whether that's with all things. We always want the next set of jobs, the widget that gets built for the data center, the widget that gets built for whatever, right? The advanced manufacturing that comes out of that. And same thing with Marshall and a lot of our other CTCs. They're training folks to do this manufacturing side of things. And that's really, with Reimagine's work, that's what they're focused on is bringing all these pieces together, I think. And that's why it's important to have these conversations about what it looks like to make sure that they are responsibly done in the areas where they're being picked. And unfortunately, we don't always get to pick them, but if we can help make sure that it's done the proper way when it is picked, then that's what we have to do in our role. And the last thing I'll talk about is the good examples of when things go well, when developers or contractors come in here and do projects. We see it, we've seen both sides of it. West Virginia for a long time has been promised a lot over the years with projects in development. We don't always see it, but we have seen some good ones, particularly in the renewable energy sector. Some of the windmill developers have started, community foundations where they're able to give back to the schools or partner with the community technical colleges to start a training program. And, to back to what I said, I think it really just shows that these projects are going to be successful if somebody really wants to be a partner with labor on the construction side of it, partner with communities on the development, and get real input on why there is a need for that in this area, right? And be a part of it. And how are we going to be part of that community? We know West Virginia has water issues. How can a data center come in and help fix those issues? How can they help upgrade our power grid system? I mean, we in West Virginia know our power system, the grid itself is years and years behind of what it needed for updating. I mean, it's constantly power outages. My power flickers at my house if the wind blows in the wrong direction some days. And so, it's not that we should have been doing this a long time ago. Data centers have just given the urgency to it. And so, I'm hopeful that we have to understand those sides of it too. It's not just we're doing this just for data centers. Maybe that's part of it, but there's also a need for some of these other improvements, investments that go along with those types of things. So, that's kind of the take where we're at. I mean, we're hopeful to see successful projects in West Virginia that are, involved in their communities, and that's what we're working for. I mean, we've had, like I said, the good conversations with a couple developers and one out in the Berkeley County we've had some calls with, and we're working on some of the other ones to try to have conversations with those folks. And that's what my job is, to make sure that we are making sure that we get those jobs, if they are built here, that they're done with local and responsibly. So thanks, Dana.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Lots of questions popping up in the chat, which we'll get to in a minute. That your comments definitely inspired a lot of thoughts. So that's great. John, let's hear a little bit. I know you and Justin work closely together, but yeah, what are you seeing?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Dana. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about, the impact on the construction industry that data centers may have, and energy projects throughout the state. So I'm John Epperly. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the West Virginia State Building Trades. My primary role is to manage the records, meetings, and finances of the organization. As Justin mentioned, we represent 15 affiliated crafts across the state of West Virginia, roughly 24,000 construction workers. And our mission, our bottom line, we help our members in a lot of different ways, but our mission is really simple in principle. We just ensure that there's good jobs for our members and long lasting careers. Local construction is our business. It's what we advocate for every day. Um, who does the work as much as what's being built matters to us. So I'd like to talk about the potential effects on the construction industry in the state of West Virginia with these data projects. What we can expect on these large data projects is anywhere from 500 to 1,500 construction workers, millions of dollars in payroll. Um, we're talking about keeping real money flowing in the communities of West Virginia. And why union construction matters, it ensures, as Justin mentioned, training, safety, consistency. It builds a local workforce and keeps our apprenticeship programs, the pipelines for them flowing. And most of all, it creates permanent jobs. Workforce just doesn't appear. You have to invest in it. And that's what we do. Um, and some real world examples I think we can look at, from our neighboring state of Ohio. Um, one particular craft over there, one particular local that I can mention with some of the data centers that they've worked on in Ohio is IBEW Local 1105. It's electricians local in Ohio. So about 8 years or so ago, they started building data centers in Ohio in this local's jurisdiction, which started out with a membership of about 300 or 400 members. Currently, today, there are over 1,200 members. And part of the concern, and we often hear with these projects that they're temporary jobs. Well, all construction is a series of temporary jobs. That's what we do. But this local has sustained their membership because they're going back and working on those same projects as the equipment becomes obsolete. So as they build it in phases, by the time they got the project done, a lot of those same folks were going back and changing out some of the equipment. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're hoping to expect in West Virginia. Obviously, the number one thing we need to make sure that happens is we get written agreements, project labor agreements. That's a term, if people's not familiar with it, that we use. And basically, it's a written agreement saying that that developer or contractor will use our folks, union construction folks, to build the project from start to finish. Um, so as we have meetings in the community, and I urge anyone that has an opportunity to talk to any of these people to bring that up. I don't think we have to choose between development and protecting our communities. I believe we can do both at the same time, and making sure that local people do the work is one of the easiest and most effective places to start. So I encourage anybody that gets the opportunity to bring that up. Are you talking to the building trades in West Virginia about building these projects and ensuring that they're local workers? Um, to close, I mean, that's really all I have to say. I think there are opportunities to put a lot of people to work if we ensure these projects are done right by local folks. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are so many great questions in the chat. I'm going to get into those questions in just a moment. I do want to share a picture really quickly. And I apologize for not having this in the slide. I thought I did, but I think you'll be able to see it. So this is an image of what a data center costs. If you're going to build a data center, what are you going to be spending your money on? And I hope you can see it. So 6% is the cooling system, 1% is the fiber, 70%, the big orange part is the chips, it's the computer stuff. 12% is the power, and 11% is the building cost. And the reason I wanted to show this is just to say that these are the richest companies in the history of the world, and a very small component of their expenses in a data center is the building itself. They can afford to pay these workers. They can afford to pay them well. That's all. That's all. I see these things sometimes and I'm like, oh, they have no excuse. They need our land, they need our workers to make their money, and they have the money, and they're getting a bargain here on everything that they're paying to build one of these sites. So they can definitely afford it. You want a citation? Sure, that's great. Appreciate y'all. So let me grab that for you. It's from a Reuters article about a month ago. If I had to guess. And yeah, so the chat is hopping. I have been taking notes from the chat, and we're gonna start walking through some of those questions. We should have plenty of time to get to everything. I've kind of rearranged them a little bit. And so one of the questions I thought there's a couple of questions just about the process of the PLAs and how they work. And so I wonder that one of the questions was who monitors the execution of these project labor agreements. And so you have a data center coming to town, an agreement is put into place to say that the work will be done under XYZ standards. Who puts that agreement into place and who makes sure that it happens? Go ahead, John.
Me and Justin do. Our office, between me and Justin, we write the memorandum of understanding. The way it works is we start with a memorandum, which is on typically a state level, me and Justin. And then we have 5 local councils around the state in which the PLA will be negotiated. So it's negotiated even on a more local level at that point. And in the PLA, you negotiate with the developer the standards and requirements of the project. And it's standard practice. Most of our PLA language is used nationally from our national affiliate, National Building Trades affiliate. So, I mean, they're pretty standard. The language you'll see in most of them are the same that you'll see across the country generally. There will be some local nuances, obviously, but
That's great. And
yeah.
so you have folks in Arkansas and Kentucky who want to know where the John and Justin of Arkansas and Kentucky are. Which it's okay if you don't know, but do you all want to address that first?
Yeah, we can definitely connect you with, the Kentucky folks. I don't know the Arkansas ones off the top of my head, but we work with our colleagues in Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania pretty regularly. So we happy to connect you with those folks. And I would also say to who enforces them, it's our members, right? I mean, they're the ones in those communities. They're driving by that job and they know whether their colleague is working on it or not. And so if they're not, they're calling their business agent, they're calling John, they're calling me, and we're calling the developer or the contractor to make sure that It is our folks out there. Trust me, it's happened where it hasn't, and we've had to go back, and then they have to pay back wages to people who would have been on that job. And so, to your point, Dana, like this is, this is they're getting by with very little in wages when it comes to construction. As far as a project, we always say that 20% of a project is generally wages is like a rough number, but 11% is even less. And so, they're getting by with a really good deal, even paying good wages and benefits. And so, making sure that the folks who are getting paid that are our folks. It's everybody. It's a full court press for sure.
And Marshall, I know y'all work all over the place. Do you have any, how do folks find you all if
Yeah.
here?
So I know you'll probably, if I could post my contact info in the chat here, but Kentucky, I believe Sheena Link, my affiliate in Kentucky, Lessett, she's on the call. So yeah, happy to make the introduction. But as John and Justin mentioned, the PLAs are usually, we usually ride with the local building trades. So, we're not out there cutting our own deals from line and out. We do have jobs where there might not be a project labor agreement. So the difference there is a PLA or an MOU is usually signed with the developer. The PLA is actually signed by the general contractor building the development. Uh, every project might not have a PLA here in Virginia or Pennsylvania, but we have signatories that win work. But yeah, absolutely happy to be the conduit to make a connection, wherever somebody may need some context.
When we're thinking about those networks and how to find them and what's needed, there was a question in the chat about, what happens with a mismatch between, workforce and talent, folks who are ready for the job doesn't scale with the employment opportunities and where they are. So that's kind of a complex way to say it, but I feel like y'all are experts in this, right? So um, what is that pipeline to, matching the opportunities, with the skills, look like? Um,
Sure, I'll jump in. I think one is, as I mentioned earlier, it's all timing, right? And so the earlier we know about it, the earlier any of our programs know about a development or a project, that means that that apprenticeship program can ramp up, right? So if we know something's coming to an area, IBW, instead of taking maybe their 25 normal ones, they can take 35 or 50 or whatever the class may be. There's also recruitment of folks who have a skill that are willing to come out there and join the union, right? So we like to call them underemployed folks, people who are willing to work with their hands, show up every day. You know, they can be trained and start an apprenticeship out that way as well. And apprenticeship programs are classroom skilled training, but then also on the job training. And so part of your apprenticeship program is learning from those folks on the job and really honing your skills on a real world job, but while you're supervised by someone with experience and training. And so, I think there's that, and quite frankly, some of these big projects, it does take, hundreds or thousands of workers. And so they're going to be folks that come in from a broader area, right? West Virginia, we consider, just like Appalachia, there are going to be people that travel from Ohio across the river into West Virginia to work, but those are still local workers, right? Because they're in that community, they understand, those values. And so there will be travelers. But what we do know when you do it with a union is that they've received the same type of training. They have the same expectations of drug-free workforce, of safety as priority and not just secondary to employment, right? And so that's where our focus really is even if people are traveling in from, another area, that they still have the same training. So when they're working with other members, they know that it's a safe place to work.
yeah. Um, Great. There's a question in here, and we have a few questions, requests in the chat for example, PLA language or examples of good ones that y'all have. I do not expect you to materialize those spontaneously in this moment, but we'll get some of those together and send them out, but in the follow-up notes. But if anybody has some of those, on top, or if you want to talk about, examples of what that process looks like, or anything else on that line, before we move to some of our next questions. I just wanted to make sure we had a minute for that. Maybe y'all already said everything to say on it. Um, so let's see, let's find the next one. There's questions in the chat about some of the state policy. And so I just want to say, our speakers and also myself, I don't think any of us are in the weeds on state policy. And so I really appreciate the experts in the chat who put in their perspective on state policy and what that can look like for data centers. But I did want to make sure I just opened it up for the speakers. Are there, any policies that you're looking for in your states or that you've seen done well? One thing, and just a little backup, one thing I say a lot is we have community after community that are looking at the exact same challenges. And it is inefficient to me, from my angle, when I hear from so many places, it feels inefficient for every single person to be dealing with them individually, which is why it's great for state level works like Justin and John and the regional work that Marshall does to be bringing folks together. But also, is there a way to kind of lift the floor for everybody through some good policy at the state level? And so, if there are pieces there that y'all would like to speak to that you're seeing in the labor sector, very happy to hear that. Anything y'all want to highlight there? Yeah.
I mean, I would just say, I mean, I know, in West Virginia had that House Bill 2014 that overrides local, communities for approving these developments for, over 90 megawatts and hyperscale developers. I know the tax revenue is a little bit kind of a tricky situation where in Loudoun County, we benefit from probably like 100% of the tax revenue that comes from these data centers. I would say half of our budget and taxes come from data centers. As a resident, I've seen my tax rate drop, the multiplier drop for my house and for like, personal property, cars. Now, community groups here in Belmont where I live, people don't love data centers. And so, like, hey, well, my house property taxes have gone up every year. I'm like, yeah, but your house has also increased in value by probably $400,000 or $500,000 since 2019. So, the rate drops, but the prices increase. So you have that. There's a situation. I think the tax revenue differentials, like maybe it's 70% goes to the state, 30% goes to local community in West Virginia. Somebody I know posted about the Governor Shapiro's the grid standards. That's that governor's responsible infrastructure development. There are some good things there where it's like part of that requires at least creating, local jobs, right? To get some of those, permit approvals. It's kind of creating some community benefits. So it'll be interesting to see how some of this works in Loudoun County. By right development on data centers up until last year. You might propose a large development, the county could shut it down. But if it's zoned for that data center, you could build whatever you want to build as long as it meets the requirements and square footage and whatever. And so they've actually shut that down here in Loudoun County. So people don't know what to do with them. Politicians, they're taking a lot of heat on data centers, but it's kind of hard to turn them away because, like you said, Dana, it's not going away. If there's a plot of land and the local government doesn't own it, the state doesn't own it, somebody owns it. If someone's willing to pay, in Loudoun County, $2 or $3 million for an acre of land, they're going to sell it. And the problem is, we want to see other development come in, but maybe those don't pencil out because the price of land is getting so expensive. But I've talked to Stack, I've talked to Sabi, I've talked to other developers. They don't care what it costs. Like they really don't care, speaking, without being like exuberant, but they don't care. Like if it's $3-4 million bucks, if they can build, they're going to buy it. And so you're competing. Other developments might not pencil out, but we are starting to see, you're seeing some moratoriums in certain states of not building data centers. Someone's going to get it. It's either going to be Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North Carolina. If they don't want it, trust me, well, West Virginia wants it because they're fast track laws. I mean, you're going to see more development coming to West Virginia. They're going to go where they can build. And so maybe it's Texas, maybe it's Indiana, maybe it's Wisconsin. Somebody's going to take advantage of the tax revenue and the infrastructure. And, it's whether you want it or not. It just kind of depends on the localities. But trust me, they're not going away. I mean, maybe as technology advances, they maybe go in space. I have no idea. But trust me, people's more connected to technology now than 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago. everyone, that has Teslas, or, you could speak to your washing machine or your oven or your lights. That data stored somewhere. So my thought is something's going there. A data center to me personally, as a Loudoun County resident, not speaking from Lena, I don't mind them. I think it's been good for us. It doesn't overload our infrastructure. We got a lot of people here, a lot of good tax revenue. I've seen the tax rates drop. So for me personally, that's just my personal opinion. And I'm living in Data Center Alley. I live in Loudoun County, so that's kind of a lot there in a little bit of time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one thing that I notice is that different communities have different amounts of leverage to advocate for themselves from. And I think Loudoun County, given its history, has a lot of leverage to be respected by the developers that are coming in. And I think there are other communities that, we see folks in the chat, talking about, some of the historic lack of tax revenue and, kind of disinvestment that their communities have seen. And those communities are really vulnerable. And so, what's the balance between not choosing what we want develop in our community to look like and not having that be a race to the bottom. One thing I say a lot about Appalachia is that it's one of the richest places in the history of the world. It's very good at creating wealth. It's not very good at keeping it. I think it's a little different in Loudoun County. I think, and my in-laws live in Loudoun County, and I've spent a lot of time there. And that feels like a place that has a better balance between the wealth that is generated and where that wealth goes. And so, there's these questions about, who is making the money and is it helping locally? And I don't think those questions have easy answers. And I know there's a lot of questions in the chat about the really big, complicated issues that people are coming with. And we're not going to get to that in the next 8 minutes. I'm not that good a facilitator, but, I just want to say like that it is just, that the complicated places that folks are coming from their different communities, it's a really big issue. And yet, as I was saying to our speakers in the past, we have data centers are bigger than pretty much anything that's ever come, particularly the hyperscale AI data centers. But in some ways, they're not all that different than stuff that's come before. So a lot of the lessons that we've learned from other kinds of development can be applied. So with all that in mind, just sort of a well, let me see. Sorry, there's the chat is flying. Um, Yeah. So just to acknowledge some of the comments in the chat, they're great ones. The data center in Memphis, Tennessee does seem to have pretty extreme environmental and health issues that are happening locally. But again, in the next now 7 minutes, I don't think we're going to have time to dig into that. I can certainly send folks articles if they want to learn more about it. But yeah, I want to kind of bring us back to this idea of what have we learned about when these big complex pieces of infrastructure come to town and how we can be ready to make sure that our communities are keeping some of the wealth that they're helping generate for these big companies. So Justin, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give kind of my final thought on that sense, right? I think one thing that's kind of been hinted at, like every one of these projects is very, very different, right? And I think that's something that has to be, to your point, right? Every community is different, every landscape, every area is different in what they're able to do. And I think that's really important to understand, right? I think there are legitimate concerns that people have, and that the data center developers should address those as they come into the communities. And that's, part of what we want to do too, right? Our members are the same folks that live in those communities. And so we don't want water to be abused. We don't want anything like that. We want good jobs, but we want responsible construction of these data centers. And so, and I mean, I think that is enough. And I would say that, to your point, like, are there bad actors? Of course there are. And they should be held accountable just like any other bad actor, whether it be a data center contractor or any other type of development that's being built. And so, that's part of what we do as well. Like we want to hold those people accountable who aren't paying good wages, who are stiffing their employees or, abusing the environment. I think permitting it needs to be upheld it should be done in a responsible way to make sure that our air and our water are not getting polluted. And our members do that too, because I always tell people, like, the people that I represent hunt and fish in West Virginia more than anybody else. And so they don't want to pollute those rivers that they have to go fish in. Trust me, John would fight anybody over the rivers of West Virginia. So that's what I would say is, like, yes, we have to, to your point, they are coming, so let's do it the right way and make sure that each project is looked at in that way.
Yeah, appreciate that. John, anything to add?
Um, I think the main closing point I'd like to end with is just is us taking advantage of the opportunity. If they're going to build them here, let's put our people to work. Let's build our pipelines of apprenticeship programs. We have 15 crafts. Anybody that knows anybody that's interested in a career in construction, please get on our website, wvtrades.org. We are currently hiring. We all know the history of this state and the out of state entities that's come into West Virginia and promised the moon and stars and left us with nothing. If this is going to have to happen, then let's take advantage of it and put our people to work. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate that. And Marshall, I don't know if you have any final thoughts before we move towards wrapping up.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, definitely understand the concerns of data centers, but I think the main driving point here is you're right, Dana. A lot of people don't know how to handle them or how to negotiate, but I think the best place to start is talk to the local building trades. I think you got to have labor at the table. We're the ones that's if they're going to be built, they got to be built responsibly, and we're the only avenue to get that done. So I think that if they're going to come to your community, push your local politicians to the building trades, that those we're the people, and then Justin and John, those are the guys going to make sure it's done right in West Virginia, and as best as possible, right? So I would just kind of drive that home. You definitely want labor at the table when it comes to building these developments.
That's a great point. And it's folks with experience pushing back about against these good companies and making sure folks get what they're due and holding them accountable. So definitely partners you want to have at the table with you from day one. That's a great way to tie it all together. I couldn't agree more with that. Really appreciate everybody. Really appreciate all the energy in the chat. Appreciate our speakers giving time out of their very busy schedules to tell us a little bit more about their work and what they know about this issue. So thank you all so much. And we will be continuing our data center webinar series. We are taking a break for the month of July. Everyone enjoy a holiday or something. If you have topics that you want us to dig into when we start the series back up in August, please be in touch with us on those. We're definitely really interested in hearing that. We are having our manufacturing series in July, Bay. So if you want to drop any links in the chat, if folks, we're definitely keeping busy in July. We're just not doing a data center webinar in July. But yeah, these issues are really complicated, and we're going to keep talking about them because that's how we're going to get through it. So appreciate you all and enjoy the rest of your day.